well with the company so that your brand matches with what the company is looking for. The topics we're going to cover are categories that we've kind of focused on in terms of how to create your brand. And there's kind of tips on when you first start out, what are some of the things you look at. Also, looking at your experience and skills. A lot of students will say, well, I've only had a job at McDonald's, or I've only worked at, as a restaurant server, I've only worked at a retail store part-time, so how is that going to make me marketable? Well, there's so many skills that you've learned in those jobs and that are probably relevant to your next employer. It could be, customer contact. Many businesses expect you to know how to deal with customers and to deal with them professionally from the very beginning when you start. And so we're going to talk about looking at your skills and seeing, is there a match? And that's kind of important in this environment, because since the firms have less spots available, they're looking for what we call the perfect matches. So if I'm in public accounting and I'm looking for somebody that has great customer contact experience, that has great teamwork skills, and that has a willingness to travel and kind of move around, because we need people to be mobile, and you come into the interview and say, I really don't want to travel, or I really like working independently. I do better when I'm by myself. I don't really like working in teams. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means you're not a match for us. You're not the right person for public accounting. So you need to go through your skills and experiences and see, what do I have, what do I bring to the table, and what do I like doing? I can't emphasize enough. You want to go for a job that you're going to like, otherwise you're not going to stay very long in that job. We're also going to talk about the resume. We're also going to help in, after you get a good resume standing out in the crowd, the campus interview piece, we'll do a kind of a short little mock interview piece to help prepare you for what the expectations are in an interview, the office visit, and then kind of a closing. And notice the campus interview is way down the list. If you're relying on that being your first opportunity of getting a job, you've waited too long. Firms come on campus for various events. You should have already networked with firms, with recruiters. You should have done a lot of things in terms of your resume. How many of you have done a mock interview before, either with Career Center or somewhere? I can't speak enough to how important doing that, having a practice session, will make you much better at that. It also makes you feel more comfortable at this. Some people don't brand themselves well or sell themselves because they're so nervous at the interview. They don't come across well. And so even though it might have been a good fit for the company, it's never going to happen because the company is going to make a first impression about that interview, and it'll all be over after that. We want to understand some of the toolkit will help you understand what employers are looking for in candidates. It's not, some students think it's like a trick. Okay, well, are the employers going to ask you tricky questions, or are they going to say they want one thing and something else? It's not tricky. We want to find people that are the right fit for our company or our profession. So the more you do in understanding what an employer is looking for, and then see, do you match up with that, the better off it is for everyone. It's not a matter of a trick when you show up to a recruiting event or to the interview. Doing the introspective look at what makes you who you are and what makes you kind of a certain type of person is going to be very helpful. Key messages about your strengths and abilities. This came out today in a couple mock interviews, and a lot of times a resume that's one page isn't always the best kind of tool to sell yourself. You've got to take advantage of that one page and make sure your skills, what things set you apart from other students, come out loud and clear on that resume. Because in this kind of marketplace where recruiters are having to cut back on travel costs, so they may not be able to come out to a school, but they're still going to ask for resumes from the school. The resume is all they're going to see before they make a decision. So if on your resume you come across very kind of vanilla, like you just don't look like you stand out, you're going to go on a pile that says, no, I'm not going to follow up further with that person. If there's things in that resume that stand out, the recruiter is more likely to say, you know what, I want to talk to this person. Maybe it's just a half-hour pre-screen interview on the phone. Maybe it's they ask you to come down to their office, and travel down to that city to talk to them. But there's got to be something in that resume. So, understanding how to develop that key message, and then the consistent look to the employers. And employers, recruiters do talk. So if you interview with one firm and you come across and say, oh, well, I really want to go to New York and work. New York is really my goal. And then you talk to another firm and say, I really want to work in Chicago. And you talk to the third firm and say, Nashville is where I really want to work. Well, the recruiters talk. from different firms and say, yeah, I interviewed that candidate, they were really good. Like, oh yeah, but, you know, it's too bad they want to go to New York, not Nashville. And the other firm saying, they told us they want to come to Nashville. That sends the wrong message because you're not being consistent in how you're approaching the recruiting process. The one thing we ask for is be open and honest with us. Tell us who you're interviewing with and what kind of, so that if you say, I'm interviewing with one firm in San Francisco for transaction services, but I'm interviewing with your firm in Chicago for audit, we'll want to know why you're choosing different practices, because maybe, you know, we can get you an opportunity in, you know, in the office that you want, the city you want, with the practice you want. But don't kind of think that the firms, you can pit them against each other or kind of hide information because they do talk. You want to have a consistent look on that. So. Roll the ball there. What are some, oh yes.
Sure. On the back of that last slide on telling people how great you are, we see a lot of interviews that are, a lot of resumes that are just single lines after single lines of job titles and dates. Now, how do you feel about a personal statement of, say, 3 to 4 paragraphs, a couple of sentences each that, in a dynamic and consistent way, detail experience and skills that people develop?
In place of a resume,
No,
or in addition to? Well, unfortunately, a lot of campus systems, if it's going to be downloaded for that, don't even allow. So it's kind of maybe limited by the space. I'll say most recruiters, especially if it's a high volume activity, so in the fall when there's a lot of recruiting going on, pretty much look at the resume, and that's the piece that sells you. And so even though there might be a cover letter, they may not take the time to read that. They're looking at the resume.
But this is in the resume. The first 2 inches of the resume.
And how many, and you said like 2 paragraphs or?
Perhaps.
I will tell you that when there's a lot of text on a resume and recruiters have to flip through 50 or 100, 150 resumes, they're going to focus on the ones that are easy to spot, to highlight. So they're going to look at GPA, they're going to look at the work experience, and if you highlighted leadership skills. So when we see bullet point format, it's easier for us. I'm just kind of being realistic here. It's easy for us to pull out a well-written bullet point format where, you know, you've chosen key words that help indicate you've been a leader and you've developed great skills. When there's a lot of text on a page, I think there is a chance that it's like, okay, there's too much to read here. I need to get through these resumes by midnight tonight and make a decision as to who I'm going to interview. So at least for public accounting, I would say it's probably not the kind of the right format. That can be totally different for another business profession where they are going to look at your objectives and your goals. So I think you have to know the industry in public accounting. We're used to the one-page bullet point format and only key information. So you know, some students, no high school stuff on there, et cetera. We'll talk about that on the resume when we get there. What are some of the things that typically employers are looking for in this environment? Global is the big. I mean, it's the buzzword. We want people who think globally, who understand that knowing how business is done internationally, globally, is going to be a critical factor. We've started actually having some of our interns spend half their internship overseas, with split their internship half the U.S. and half it overseas, helping working on a global client. We expect people to understand some of the nuances and changes going on in the marketplace in public accounting, IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. It's basically going to be adopted in the U.S. sooner than later, so we expect students to have that. So global is important, team players, but diverse teams and teams where you've had both a chance to pick your teammates and those you haven't had a chance to pick your teammates.